this week's Torah portion is Parashat Shoftim. It starts off talking about placing judges and kind of like police into basically maintaining a sense of law and order, basically. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, isn't it important to have law and order to have a civilized society?
Yes, and actually, so this is a very clear articulation in this week's Torah portion about maintaining a sense of law and order and more importantly, fairness in adjudicating like court cases and all that stuff. So, and I don't know how comparatively other people have it, but for us, it's important. So let's go to the sources. So here we have the very beginning. So what we're looking at in this week, what I've got for the sources here, we've got two chunks. I'm just going to give a broad overview and then we'll dive in. So the first chunk, as it were, is from the very outset of this week's Torah portion. And then later on, we'll be talking about something that appears towards the end of this week's Torah portion, but directly connects from what the start of it is. So the name of the Torah portion, Shoftim, is also, as we see here, it's the very first word of this week's Parsha, which Shoftim, which literally means like judges. This English translation says magistrates, but the idea is people who adjudicate cases. The next word is Shotrim, which it's kind of unclear what that means. It says here officials, which officials doesn't really mean any, like it could be anything very vague. Possibly more like the police. So do you want to read this paragraph? Do you want me to read this paragraph?
Which paragraph are we talking about?
It's this top paragraph here from Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy 16, 18 through 20.
Exactly.
Is that what you want me to read?
That'd be great.
All right, I will, as
Wonderful.
best I can. Let's see. You shall anoint magistrates and officials for your tribes in all the settlements that the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall govern the people with due justice. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eye of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that the Lord your God is giving you.
Yep. Thank you, Deb. Thank you. So one of the things, so this is really all about judging, making sure that there's justice around, and that, as you, 18 sounds very nice of having people to do this, but 19 is really important for the practice of it, of not taking bribes, of not showing favor, and trying to make it equal. And what we see in verse 20 really is, and by the way, it starts off very curiously, and for centuries, commentators have been kind of puzzled by the strange language, because there's actually a double language. You can see it in the English, justice shall you pursue. In the Hebrew, it's equally awkward, which is tzedek, tirdof. Now, this repetition of tzedek, or justice, is strange in English. It's just as strange in English as it is in the Hebrew. It's a curious doubling which doesn't normally occur. And as we'll see, I think a commentator or two, let's see. Yeah, we'll see a couple of medieval commentators on this verse, although there are so many other commentaries throughout the centuries on this doubling of language that is very curious. Do you have any thoughts or comments on this section of 3 verses?
Well, you mean on 16?
Yes.
I think if our society would follow that particular thing and not taking bribes, etc., we'd be a lot happier and more balanced as a society. But the way our society works today, we haven't, well, we aren't just, we aren't fair. American societies, and probably maybe others too, corrupt. We're very corrupt.
Although the American society is not as corrupt as many other countries, Brazil,
That's true, but we
there are
are
plenty of,
we are corrupt.
yeah, Africa. There are plenty of countries out there that corruption and bribes are quite common and normal place. In America, at least, if it's found to occur, then it's a real problem, right?
That's right.
Whereas other countries, that's just the price of politics, right? So
Correct.
at least it's America compared to other countries. We're doing pretty well with bribes and corruption, even if we're not perfect, right? Yeah. So there's, like I said, there's this overwhelming sense of justice. And actually, you know what? We'll skip down. We'll come back to this other Deuteronomy section, but I want to skip down to a couple of commentaries on this doubling of language, this curious tzedek tzedek tirdof. So we have Rashi, and we've mentioned Rashi in the past here. Rabbi Solomon Isaac, he was a French, like a Franco-German commentator, but sort of I don't know if we want to call him the king or the prince of all commentators, but he's certainly, he's really good. He's really helpful. Not saying he's the end all be all, but he's certainly a helpful starting place. And so what he says here on the doubling of tzedek, tzedek tzedek tirdof, the pursuing of justice, he says, now this is really simple, just simply pursuing or searching after a reliable court, which is a fascinating, I mean, the thing that for me stands out of it is twofold. One is the going after, the searching after. It's not just, yeah, you should, whatever court's convenient, but it's really this pursuing, not just like go and execute justice, but actually pursue it, go after it, is really fascinating. And then on top of that, it's also this, in Hebrew it says Beit Din Yafeh, but in the English it's a reliable court. So meaning it's something that I would not have expected that any court will do, but he says try to find a reliable one, which means already kind of his, he's already articulating that some courts are less reliable than others. Maybe, as you would point out, maybe some are less corrupt than others, right? And then he has another comment on this exact same verse, but later on in the verse, which is the language of in order that you shall live and you shall inherit. This is what he's commenting on. He says, in order that the appointment of honest judges is sufficient merit to keep Israel in life and to settle them in security in their land. So that there's, meaning that why should we bother with this pursuing of justice or this doubling of justice, like this emphatic pursuing of justice? Well, it's without it, we can't reside reliably in the land, meaning it helps this, the not just the dwelling, but really the I don't know, the secure society, having a good civil society, and that without it, chaos could erupt, right? And then one other comment on this verse, but this is from Ibn Ezra. He's an interesting guy. He spent time in London at some point. He went around. He was a smart fellow, but not everybody cared for him. So he says, why is this doubling of language? Because it's strange in English, strange in Hebrew. He says, Scripture addresses the litigants, that the word appears twice because one must pursue justice, whether it be for one's gain or one's loss, or the repetition denotes time after time, all the days of your life, or for emphasis. So it's for, he's trying to come up with different reasons, because it is a strange doubling. On the one hand, it's for the different litigants, whether it's for both sides of it, and also it's the whether you're going to lose or win, but you should definitely be pursuing justice. And again, the end, it's this emphatic aspect, which should really be a significant call to Jews to say, like, we are this is a clear value in Jewish life of having justice. Any thoughts?
No.
Okay. I mean, in our tradition, there's not a big pushback because we threw out, and it's not exclusive to here, the notion of having justice and maintaining civil order, civil society, and fair adjudication. It's hard to argue against it, and we have it throughout. So, but I think that this is one of the clearest articulations, especially verse 20 here is justice, justice shall you pursue. I think is the clearest articulation throughout the entirety of the Torah, throughout our biblical traditions. Okay, so I wanted to pick up on this, which I thought was quite fascinating, actually. And later in this is in chapter 19. Here we go. I'll read this, unless you'd like to take this again.
I'll be glad to do it.
Sure.
A single witness may not validate against a person any guilt or blame for any offense that may be committed. A case can be valid only for the testimony of two witnesses or more. If a man appears against another to testify maliciously and give false testimony against him, the two parties.
Yeah, the two parties. Yeah, you have it.
I've got to find, you moved it.
I'm sorry, I moved it just a little bit to get all the English. The two parties to the dispute. It's around 17, verse 17.
Okay, thank you. The
Yeah.
two parties to this dispute shall appear before the Lord, before the priests or magistrates in authority at the time. And the magistrates shall make a thorough investigation. If the man who testified is a false witness, if he has testified falsely against his fellow, you shall do to him as he schemed to do to his fellow. Thus, you will sweep out evil from your mind. Others will hear and be afraid, and such evil things will not again be done in your midst, nor must you show pity. Life before life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot.
Thank you, Deb.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyway, this is interesting because it sets up that you shouldn't testify falsely against your fellow man, which is fine, and I understand that. And then if you do, it is a eye for eye, tooth for tooth kind of punishment.
Yeah, and the idea is if you were testifying against someone that they did such and such, and the punishment would be whatever it is, that means the people who testified falsely would get that punishment that they testified to that person about that person.
Right. As an accomplice, correct?
No, as if they had themselves had done it.
Well, yes, but they're the individual who has lied or falsely, lied against the other person. So eye for eye, tooth for tooth, they get the same punishment as the individual who actually did the wrong.
Sort of. There's a person, let's say there's a person who is being accused. There's another person who's coming in and saying that this person did the crime, but they didn't do the crime, right?
Right, yeah.
And let's say it was, I don't know, we'll say it's the death penalty, but it could be something else. Let's say it's the death penalty. Then the false witnesses who claim that this person did the deed, even though they didn't, that the false witnesses would get killed instead. Or even if it's just paying $50, right? Oh, I saw so-and-so steal X amount of dollars and they have to pay it back, but they lied. right? They are false witnesses. And the false witnesses themselves have to pay $50 in addition to whomever actually did it. Like they would still have to find the person who did it, who did the crime, but that the people, anybody coming to claim that someone else who did not do the crime did it, and they're found out, then they themselves also have to receive the punishment. It's almost like they have to know what's at stake. You can't just come around, start claiming, and as a witness and giving testimony that so-and-so did such and such, that they want to it sounds like Moses is trying to tell them, you got to take this seriously. If you're going to make claims against people falsely, we can't work a justice system like that. It's not fair. We need to rely upon people's trustworthiness and truth-telling for the system to work properly.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a fascinating thing as opposed to saying, well, if you're going to come and falsely testify, it could be like a flat sort of fee or a flat punishment. And no matter what it is, whether it's something about someone stealing, about someone killing, about someone doing something, whatever, that they just get, no matter what, But here it's not saying it's an objective punishment. It's a subjective punishment, subject to whatever they're claiming this person actually had transgressed.
All right.
Yeah, which is so fascinating. So, although we saw these few medieval commentaries, I wanted to touch upon two other comments of Rashi, but on this section that I found of particular interest. So one is that they shall hear and fear. So this is on verse 20. So this is Vanisharim Yishmu. Where is it going? Hopefully I didn't lose it totally, whatever. Verse 20, others will hear and fear. Meaning this is the reason given for why this law against the false witnesses or false testimony being provided. Others will hear and be afraid. And such evil things will not be done again in your midst. Meaning there's going to be some punishment. People need to take this seriously, and other people will see and hear, and they'll be afraid, which makes perfect sense that they're an example is being made of them. That you can't just come in here, claim falsely. That people need to be able to trust in the system to properly adjudicate cases. So what Rashi says here is, from here we derive the law that a public announcement is required. The men named so-and-so are to be executed because they have been convicted by the court as plotting witnesses, these false witnesses. They've come together, they plotted, because you can't just have one witness, you need two witnesses. And these two guys or women have come together, they plotted, they want to do something to someone else, claiming whatever, but they specifically needed to be called out as such because that they were trying to mess with the court. You can't have courts being messed up. So here they're actually being called out, being publicly announced as having done as such, which is it's really fascinating. It's almost like really deeply personal, but at the same time, it's really saying it's these specific people. And one other comment in this section that I wanted to point out is this as they had intended to do, meaning, and Rashi points this out clearly, as he had intended to do, but not as he actually did. Hence, the rabbi stated that if the false witnesses had already killed, they are not to put to death, which is really fascinating. Can't argue, ain't argue, which is really strange. But yeah, if the false witnesses have already killed, if the defendant has already been executed. Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't understand that the first time I read that, so I'm going to say that again, but now having understood it, which is, let's say they testify that so-and-so had killed some other person, right? And that the person against whom they had testified had already been put to death. So if the court has already executed this person, then the witnesses who falsely testified are not themselves to be killed. Meaning it's just about timing. If they got discovered after the person was put to death as being false witnesses, they can remain living. But if the person had not yet been killed and they are discovered, then they themselves are to be killed, which is, I hadn't realized that before just now.
That's the real difference. That
Yeah, that is
I,
different.
I don't know if I don't understand that either.
Well,
It
yeah.
doesn't make logical sense.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting direction, meaning they're not going to kill. I mean, if you're going to falsely accuse someone of killing someone and they get killed by the court, you better hope that they do it really quickly if you're a false witness. Because if you get found out before that person's killed, then you get killed.
Right.
But it seems almost like once this person is killed, what are you going to do by killing these other people? On the other hand, it allows them to get away because it's not providing the warning or deterrent. That's the word I was looking for. It doesn't provide the deterrent to other people from falsely accusing people of murder, which maybe, who knows, maybe that's an incentive for the courts to delay any sort of execution in case they need to do some further inquiry or investigation of any witnesses. Because who knows, like when people come to testify and witness, you don't know whether they're being true or lying. Ultimately, we don't know.
We never will. Of course, this was written how many thousand years ago?
Yeah, a few thousand years ago. So it's tough. But also it's not like today where we have cameras. We have lots of other ways of proving evidence of something happening. For them, they really needed witnesses. Now, one of the interesting things that they set up is not just simply saying one witness. Nowadays, we will go in America, court testimony will take, a single witness. But what was fascinating that back then was they would require multiple witnesses, 2 or 3, right? 2 or 3 witnesses, because that way it allows for basically like a confirmation that if it's one person as a witness, can you really trust them? But 2, 3 people, okay, at least you have, it's multiple eyeballs, multiple perspectives, and it's not just a single person, but really multiple people. It has a public aspect to it, that they really caught it, and then ultimately that they are theoretically more believable, unless you get this case of these falsifying, these scheming witnesses, which is particularly devious and detrimental to the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One other thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that the complete Torah section for today, for this week?
Those are the discussion sources that I wanted to share with us today. There's actually one other thing I just thought of for a moment, which was that there's also there's a rabbinic text in the Babylonian Talmud, which talks about 7 laws that were given to the children of Noah. That these laws are meant for all of humanity, at least post the flood, and that one of these was setting up courts of justice. So the rabbi certainly understood that having a sense of justice and courts of justice were not only something that the Jews did, but actually is something that really is meant to be a more universal for all humanity as a value. And so that was their articulation of it, that they really believed that there needs to be courts of law set up.
Well, this was a very interesting segment.
Yeah.
A Torah section. It really was. You see it, you can apply that part of the Torah to your family and even disciplining your children. True?
Yeah, getting a sense of law and not playing favorites.
Mm-hmm.
To look at them all equally on
Right.
the same playing field. And if you show favorites, then, I'm not saying it's a perversion of justice, but it could definitely cause frustration. Who knows what else down the line. So yeah, that's an issue. Trying to make it smaller, like not just on a societal level of showing favorites, but what if in the family it could be detrimental to maintaining order.
Right.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. This is good on this law and order discussion. So
I enjoyed it,
me.
and I really enjoy doing these. I learn a lot.
I'm
Thank
very happy to
you.
hear that. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. All
Have
right.
a good day.